There may be bigger canyons, others possibly narrower or deeper, but none of them are anywhere near as fascinating or as utterly awesome as the Grand Canyon. When standing on the edge of the huge gorge, it is immediately clear just why people treat creation with respect and why they believe in the omnipotence of nature. The veneration and trust that primitive people place in the miracles of nature also becomes immediately clear. One sees the big picture in a different light, standing here open-mouthed before the beauty of a monument to the history of our planet's origin. At the Grand Canyon, even the greatest skeptics become aware that this World Natural Heritage, acknowledged by UNESCO as a World Natural Heritage Site in 1979, will outlast humanity, no matter what happens. The first Europeans to see the Grand Canyon were fortune hunters and prospectors, searching for the 7 golden cities of Cibola, led by the Spaniard Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. These men had no eyes for the beauty of the moment. They were disappointed as they were forced to accept that in this, for them insurmountable obstacle, signified the end of their dreams of gold and wealth. The Grand Canyon was virtually forgotten until Joseph Christmas Ives attempted to navigate the Colorado River in 1858. He failed, prophesied gloom. It appears as if it is nature's intention that the Colorado, along with the majestic landscape, shall remain unvisited and undisturbed. Since then, more than 100 million people have visited the Grand Canyon and navigated the Colorado. We are now in Williams in Arizona. The small town in Coconino County sees itself as the gateway to the Grand Canyon. We came here because we wanted to sense the fascination of the canyon firsthand. We want to follow in the footsteps of the discoverer John Wesley Powell and let him guide us through the Grand Canyon. In 1869, some 11 years after Joseph Ives' failed attempt, Powell became the first immigrant to navigate the Colorado from Green River Station to Virgin River. He set off with 4 small boats, of which 2 arrived at their destination after a 3-month-long journey covering around 500 miles of river. There's no getting around Williams, whether going to or leaving the canyon. The most stylish method has to be with the Grand Canyon Railway, tracks of which run parallel to Route 66 for more than 60 miles directly to Canyon City. In summer, the old steam locomotives, like this 280 Consolidation, are hooked up and that old Wild West feeling is back in Arizona. But for the rest of the year, modern air-conditioned diesel trains provide a scheduled service. The Williams Canyon City line was opened in 1901 by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway. It was considered to be the main artery regarding the exploitation of the Grand Canyon, where uranium mines have been opened. The coveted ore had to be transported to a hub. Other resources were suspected in the region, but hopes of their discovery were soon dashed. The line was threatened with an inglorious end. But in 1989, the newly formed Grand Canyon Railway took over and still runs the service today, predominantly to transport tourists. The first settlers enjoyed this view across Mather Point. Until this day, it is generally the first view that manifests itself when looking into the canyon from the south rim. But Desert View is also of historic value. Scholars are still debating whether or not the expedition from Coronado came to a halt here. Not that this bothers him. This prairie dog has found a place to stay at the lower edge of the rim. By the way, the Indians considered prairie dogs to be a delicacy. The ungainly animals play a key role in their habitat. Their subterranean building activities not only offer more prairie inhabitants like owls and snakes protection and breeding possibilities, they also loosen the compressed soil. Prairie dogs owe their name to the dog-like call they expel when they sense danger. In actual fact, they are relatives of groundhogs or marmots, are usually around 35 centimeters in size and weigh up to 1.5 kilograms. In the days of the first settlers and trappers in America's Wild West, prairie dogs were the cause of a large number of injuries and fatalities. Their passages branch out far beneath the earth. Stepping into one of the entrances often had disastrous consequences for both horse and rider. A broken leg signified the death sentence for a horse and a catastrophe for the rider. Alone in the wilderness, it often meant the death sentence for the rider too, as it is impossible to survive in the harsh climate of the canyon. From the air, the Grand Canyon looks like a cut through the landscape. It becomes evident that the riverbed has practically eaten its way through rock strata of different ages. In the foreground, kaibab lime and sandstone can be seen, whilst directly at the perimeter of the canyon, red Coconino sandstone is visible. One of the landmarks of the Grand Canyon, built by man, is the Navajo Bridge. The bridge spans the Marble Canyon with a length of 188 meters and is one of the three possibilities by means of which one can cross the Grand Canyon from east to west. The Colorado River dug its way through the kaibab sandstone of the marble platform into the Toroweep sandstone beneath it. Both are especially hard, which is why the Colorado has almost straight, sloping banks in Marble Canyon. Round stones are anything but a rarity on the marble platform. It is unclear whether the Colorado has washed them round or whether they were hewn by human hand. The romanticism of the era is awakened in the old hermitage shortly after the first attempts to explore the Grand Canyon. This stone house reflects the architecture of the times of change into the 19th century. A peek through the window is more akin to an oil painting than a view to the outside world. An odd atmosphere prevails over visitors to the house, located immediately adjacent to the only road passing the canyon. On our way toward Colorado, we pass by Navajo Point. Located at an altitude of 2,447 meters, it provides a spectacular view of the layer structure and subsequently the origins of the canyon. Here in the center is the Grand Canyon Supergroup. This is a formation of igneous rock and sediments dating back 700 million years to the Precambrian, the world's oldest geological era. These formations can be found all over the canyon. Characteristic are long, thin veins of maroon, grey and black layers which lean at an angle of roughly 20 degrees. The plateaus and cliff projections of the supergroup provide the lynx with a perfect habitat. He lives here in the forest zones close to the canyon. The lynx is a nocturnal hunter. Prey consists of rabbits and hares, but he is also partial to snowshoe hares. The latter used to be widespread in the United States, but have become almost entirely extinct. Subsequently, the lynx population is seriously endangered. Scientists assume, however, that the change in population of the snowshoe hares and the lynx is linked, and that a change in the numbers of the animals will adjust within a year. Doing so, an equilibrium is guaranteed, so the scientists, enabling the lynx to survive. When night falls in the Grand Canyon, visitors can experience a unique natural spectacle. Like here at Mojave Point, the rock formations change their color mystically in the sunset. An enchanted atmosphere is created by wandering shadows, an atmosphere well worth enjoying. The diversity of the Grand Canyon is derived from the altitude and climate differences in the canyon and on its edges. There are 5 vegetation zones: the river and the littoral zone, a desert strip in the inner canyon, plateau zone, the south edge with its ponderosa pines, and the north edge with a spruce and fir forest. Following the completion and opening of the Interstate Highway 40, Seligman, and indeed most of the other locations on Route 66, was cut off overnight from the transit traffic of this historic east-west connection, originally built in 1926. Many towns and villages fell into disrepair as the numbers of people passing by abruptly decreased. Motels, restaurants, and fuel stations were no longer able to generate an income. It wasn't until a wave of nostalgia arose in the 1980s that the Route 66 and the localities associated with it enjoyed new glory. Seligman's main claim to fame, however, is the fact that it provided the backdrop to Cars, 2006 Pixar animated movie featuring Lightning McQueen. The reason for all the weird-looking cars here with eyes and cloudy windscreens. In Cars, all of the characters are vehicles that react like humans or animals. There are no real people in the movie. This is not true of the original Seligman, which has a typical and quaint Route 66 feel to it. Touristy, yes, but charming. Seligman is cool and definitely worth a visit. But we have almost forgotten why we are here. We are now on the Colorado River, which flows leisurely through the canyon. Looking at it, it's hard to understand why the river claims so many lives until John Wesley Powell explored it. We are, however, confident of finding answers during the course of our journey. The river has its source in the Rocky Mountain National Park in the state of Colorado, on the west flank of the Continental Divide, northwest of Denver, at an altitude of 3,148 meters. It flows from the Rocky Mountains to Utah and Arizona and delineates the entire border between Arizona and California. The Colorado then continues into Mexico, where it forms a delta and empties into the Gulf of California almost 2,400 kilometers later. It rises in an elevated position. Snowmelt and high precipitation constitute an almost inexhaustible water reservoir. At its source, the Colorado is a clear mountain brook, which during the course of its long journey to the sea, turns into a muddy torrent colored red by sediment. During its course to the sea, it flows through a large arid region and discharges its water into the surrounding landscape. This makes it a so-called Stranger's River in the federal states of Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and California, meaning that it doesn't rise in the region it flows through, but carries water from another region. Thus, the microclimate in the shore areas changes, making agriculture and water management possible. Where the Colorado leaves the Rocky Mountains, the highlands of the Colorado Plateau begins, and with it, the middle reaches of the river. Here, due to erosion, the Colorado and its tributaries have created numerous unique landscapes. At a length of some 1,600 kilometers, it flows through several canyons, such as the Glenwood Canyon in Colorado, the Glen Canyon in Utah, the Marble Canyon, and the Grand Canyon in Arizona. The lower course of the Colorado River begins at the exit to the Grand Canyon. And here we encounter the enemy of all goldfish ponds and hobby aquarists, great blue heron, a relative of the European grey heron. Great blue herons usually breed in colonies, in trees on the borders of lakes and other wetlands. Their large nests are built of twigs and mostly located in heights of up to 40 meters. They hunt preferentially in water for fish, invertebrates, frogs, and small mammals, by motionlessly waylaying their prey or chasing them at a moderate pace. It often looks as though a statue has been erected on the shore, until the heron moves like lightning with a fish in its beak. If the bird gets a little hot under the collar, it just spreads its wings and stands still, often for hours on end. $8.5 million liters of water flow through the riverbed of the Colorado every second. At its peak, this flow is 20 kilometers per hour. As a comparison, the tidal current of the River Elbe in Germany flows at a maximum rate of 8 kilometers per hour, and the Elbe is the river with the highest flow velocity in Europe. These figures show that the Colorado is one of the largest rivers in the world. It is also the undisputed world champion in material transport. On any given day, the Colorado transports 27 million tons of mud. To transport this amount on land, it would require 2.7 million trucks with a respective load capacity of 10 tons. If these trucks drove off in convoy, the queue would stretch 34 times around the world. Not included in the equation is the debris that the river carries with it in the flow direction. This can only be estimated, and geologists assume that the Colorado transports as much of this as it does mud. On the river, where it can be negotiated safely, one feels nothing. Here, it's the beauty of nature that counts, which can be enjoyed on a soft rafting trip. It is fascinating to see the reflections of the rocks that conjure up the light that falls on the surface of the water. Sometimes it feels as if you were floating in a cave. The boat glides silently along the river, with only the sounds of nature as a soundtrack. The Colorado is also a paradise for anglers, but the numerous barrages of the river have dramatically reduced fish stocks. Because of its migratory nature, white salmon, a kind of carp, which was given its name by the Indians and the first settlers, served as a welcome source of protein amongst the population. One of these fish, which can be up to 1.8 meters long and weigh 45 kilograms, could feed an entire family for a week. Toads and frogs also inhabit the littoral zones of the Colorado. Our journey takes us past astonishing formations. The rocks stand neatly in line like slices of bread. The red rocks are an especially fine example of the Grand Canyon supergroup, view of which is particularly good from the river. The dark veins that run through the stone of the up to 800 million year old rock stratum are reminiscent of marble. Wild horses graze on the shores. They live in the riparian areas of the Colorado, brave some of the harshest climatic conditions in the USA. It can be as much as 50 degrees Celsius in the summer and up to -20 in the winter. Nowhere else on the American continent has a temperature range quite like this. Our journey ends at the Glen Canyon Dam. This dam serves as a flow regulator for Lake Mead and it's 593 square kilometers. Around 80% of the sediment transported from Colorado is deposited at the Glen Canyon Dam. Environmentalists always considered its construction to be one of the greatest natural sins in the USA, as the Glen Canyon was completely flooded as a consequence of the barrage. Until then, it was always seen as the most beautiful of all in the Great Grand Canyon. Its downfall was due to the fact that it was too far from the usual tourist trails. Lake Powell serves as a drinking water reservoir for Las Vegas. The water consumption of the gambling metropolis has led to a 25-meter reduction of the water level of the reservoir. Numerous tributaries feed the Colorado. On the one hand, larger bodies of water like the Little Yellow River, but on the other, also by countless smaller streams that flow into the Great Red River. Now we're in the highlands of the Grand Canyon, just beneath the canyon's edge. The green vegetation here is the complete opposite of the otherwise inhospitable landscape. Bighorns. The Indians once not only appreciated the meat of the bighorn sheep, but also their horns. They can be found in higher altitudes and have adapted ideally to life in the mountains. Bighorn sheep are excellent climbers and outstanding swimmers. They live in communities of roughly 10 animals. The greatest threat to them is the cougar, or mountain lion, who shares the habitat with them. The cougar is one of the native inhabitants of the Grand Canyon region. He lives here on the plateau of the highlands and has also adapted ideally to its habitat. Mature animals can weigh up to 60 kilograms. They are actually timid loners and prefer a large territory of their own. Depending on their numbers, This can be as much as 1,000 square kilometers. They are also perfect hunters and can achieve speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour, although they seldom use this ability. Their strength when jumping is really impressive. The big cats can effortlessly jump 5 meters into a tree, something the animals mainly use when being chased by their sole enemies, bears and wolves. Bighorn sheep, on the other hand, are at the top of a cougar's menu in the Grand Canyon. Park rangers often tersely refer to the sheep cougar food. When on the hunt, a cougar's agility is a great advantage, also in the mountains. He's able to adapt to any surface and is therefore often successful. Cougars usually creep up behind their prey and, once within reach, kill them with one fell swoop of their claws. Should a victim manage to escape, cougars rarely take up chase, but rather look for a new delicacy. Beyond the tree line, we encounter wild donkeys. The donkeys are descendants of those brought here by the Spanish conquerors. They left the animals behind when they left the country. They are known as burros and have developed into robust little animals. They can be found across the entire highland plateau of the Grand Canyon, as well as in the valley close to the old mines. This small donkey foal is close to death. It has broken one of its hind legs, presumably in a prairie dog burrow. It can hardly stand, and the herd senses that the little creature is running out of time. The herd is ready to move on, but the mother of the little one doesn't want to accept that she is losing her foal. This constitutes a drama for the herd, but is a godsend for coyotes, cougars, and scavengers. The tree line of the Grand Canyon lies around an altitude of some 1,500 meters and mainly consists of pinyon pines and juniper. The semi-arid climate supports the growth of the robust plants. The undergrowth comprises dwarf oaks and large sage bushes. But both danger and opportunity lurk here in regard to the vegetation. Forest fires can occur here due to lightning or spontaneous combustion, devastate entire regions of the Grand Canyon. At the same time, however, forest fires enable the comprehensive regeneration of the forest soil, thereby supporting the growth of new plants. Burnt biomass is rich in minerals and creates an environment in which new life can emerge. The forest burns regularly in the Grand Canyon. Rangers and foresters ensure that forest fires do not spread into wildfires and install fire breaks in the forest areas. They have realized that the forest regenerates by itself and that in the end, healthier trees emerge. In this way, the desolate site of charred tree stumps also invariably provides nature with the opportunity to begin a fresh start. Apart from the river, the plateau is the preferred habitat of the animals living in the Grand Canyon. There are some 70 different species, from the cougar to the elk. The dense undergrowth provides ideal cover and shade, green spaces and the brush sufficient food. Two different types of zerine, or ground squirrel, also live here. The Abert squirrel and the Kaibab squirrel. Their habitats were separated during the course of evolution. The animals are now genetically so far apart that researchers speak of two different kinds. This too is a fact that characterizes the Grand Canyon habitat. The canyon is an ecosystem that is constantly changing and adapting to this. The Grand Canyon can be explored in a variety of ways, on the back of a donkey, on the river, or on foot. The descent on the back of a donkey is probably the most impressive way to experience the beauty of the canyon. Those unwilling to walk the long route should definitely choose this method, as the back of a mule is significantly more comfortable than Shanks's pony. The trail is steep but well developed. The descent into the canyon takes around 4 hours to complete. The Bright Angel Trail, along with the South Kaibab Trail, provides the only possibility of reaching the bottom of the canyon. En route, one is confronted with the Earth's entire geological history, passing by rock formations which are up to 1.5 billion years old, thereby experiencing the origins of the Grand Canyon at first hand. The Bright Angel Trail is the most difficult of the two trails. but has a decisive advantage. There are 3 water holes en route. The trail was built by the Havasupai tribe. They wanted to collect water from the water holes on the trail for their villages and constructed it entirely by hand. The Bright Angel Trail is roughly 1.50 meters wide, and it drops steeply in some places. It is also the path used by mule caravans, which always have priority. This can be particularly unpleasant, as mule caravans always remain on the rock side of the trail and travelers have to make way. To even consider a shying mule bucking and being thrown into the deep is hardly a pleasant feeling when standing next to the edge of the trail. The Bright Angel Trail is in a good state of repair. Volunteers from all parts of the United States selflessly care for the preservation of the trail. The volunteers form human chains and carry bucket loads of rocks and earth up the mountain to carry out maintenance work, keep the trail in good condition. When hiking in or on the edge of the canyon, one thing is inescapable: the landscape. Impressive formations like here at Monument Point, or further down at Maricopa Point, burn unforgettable images into the memories of every visitor, certainly of those who take the time to allow the canyon to cast its spell on them. A flight over the canyon has to be one of the most spectacular adventures that one can experience at the Grand Canyon without having to expose themselves to the limits of physical endurance. The American way of adventuring, so to speak. Those with more confidence are treated to even more impressions and come very close to that which is known as the creation, Genesis, different religions of the world. Closer, more exact look and many details can be found, those that appeared hidden at first glance. Animals, irrespective of their size, do not arrive alone. They need patience and an open mind. Due to their natural camouflage, these jackals are very hard to make out. This also has a rarity value. Cacti at an altitude of 1,000 meters, beyond the tree line and in a climate reminiscent of Mexico. How they came to be in the Grand Canyon, no one knows. Now they colonize a mountain slope, and you could be forgiven expecting John Wayne to appear at any moment. As our journey slowly draws to an end, a rare sight. A tornado whirls over the highlands of the canyon. We have followed in the footsteps of John Wesley Powell, navigated the Colorado River, and discovered that the wild Mustang from the days of the first settlers has turned into a tired old nag. It now flows at a leisurely pace, tamed by reservoirs and dams through the gorges it has carved out in the course of millions of years. Nevertheless, the Colorado remains the world's most valuable river. The energy alone, which is generated by its flow velocity, exceeds $1 billion annually. A further billion is contributed by water management and aquatic sports at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. At the same time, the Colorado has laid the foundation for people to engage in agriculture in an otherwise inhospitable region, which results in 3 harvests in California alone. This has transformed California from a desert into a thriving region and is an example of teamwork and the interplay of economics and ecology. But despite all of this, detached from economics and tourism, the Grand Canyon remains one of the most important testimonies to the history of the creation of our world. This demands respect from each and every one of us, even though the incorrigible continually suggest flooding this wonder of nature. We, in any case, take our leave in humility of this perhaps not largest, widest, or deepest canyon in the world. However, we do take along with us that wonders need time to evolve, and like the Grand Canyon, sometimes it takes millions of years.